The best thing I can highlight to that is pretty much like how it all started. Of course, I was born into um it was a witch coven. There's no other way to say it but to say it. I was born into a witch coven, and my father was a warlock. He was involved in not just that, but we were also being groomed. He had like 8 women with him. He always had like certain women that would do certain things for him, like, and it wasn't just remedial task. It was like women that had professions. So they were either bankers, they were lawyers, they were accountants, uh, and he even had women that were overseas. And my father would uh, literally control these women, and it was all part of this. It was all part of this little cult that like they had going on, and every single one of them would practice witchcraft with my father. These women would literally sign their life away. These women had families. These women had marriages. They literally left their estates, their marriages, their children. They left to be with my father, and that's pretty much how like I found out what I was actually born into, of course, later on in my life. But the whole time I was in my childhood, everything was just golden. Like there were things that I would see that I would thought that were normal, such as people just being just completely naked. My father walked around completely naked. These women walked around completely naked, and I would uh, I would say to myself, well, that's normal, so I can walk around completely naked, and they would do sexual acts in front of me. My father would literally, pick me up on his lap, sit me on his lap, so we can watch pornography together. And little did I know, he was grooming me to be the next, uh, I guess you want to say, like, witch in charge. And I had no idea what exactly was going on at that time. Just like I was just innocent. I was just being a kid. I'll be playing with my wrestlers and things like that. And I had these action figures I would play with, and my father would interrupt that by we would sit and watch dirty movies, and like he would have me like sit, and we would eat snacks while we do it. When I became close to like 5 years old, he got me this big teddy bear. It was a giant teddy bear, and that he would show me, the things that you see me do with those girls. Well, he would have me practice doing sexual acts with this giant teddy bear, and thinking it was just normal, so I did, and I practiced with that giant teddy bear. And after it was all said and done, I went ahead and started to question certain things, such as like, where is my mother at? Come to find out later on in my life that my mother almost had me in prison. When she went to prison, my father took us from my mother before she went to prison. Basically would call my mother into coming to the airport, saying that he would help her out and do things for her, and him and his women were there to pretty much kidnap me and my sister both. And after that, he got my mother arrested because my father was in league with the authorities. My father was a powerful man. He had connections all over across the United States, overseas. and there were certain things that he would call into order at certain times in certain places, and they would agree to do those things. So after he kidnapped us and took us to, first of all, we went to London, England. I traveled to London, England, and I got to there meet my stepmother, which my father got involved into. Um, Married her, and that's the first time in my life where I actually went through child abuse, physically and sexually, and I didn't have a I didn't have a say so in nothing. If I was hungry, I get beat. If I was thirsty, I get beat. If I even looked at her, I get beat. I couldn't even go to the restroom. And mind you, I was like, 5, 6 years old by now, and she would lock the door when it was time to do certain activities. And just like I said, I couldn't even go to the restroom. I had to literally bang on the door, and sometimes she would never come answer the door. She would just leave it locked. So what I would have to do, I would find a vent and I would urinate in the vent. And just one day, after I did it, she came through, bust open the door, and I got, scolded for urinating in the vent, and she beat me with everything but a belt. So, after that, the cycle of violence just kept on going on and going on. Like, I couldn't even eat like my breakfast without even just getting hit in the face. I really had no idea what was really going on. All I knew is that I was so terrified of her. There were things like I would go to school, and out of nowhere I would get kicked down the steps, and you know, people would laugh and make fun of or whatever, and my stepmother would be the one to instigate it all. You know, um, there were certain times where even though the door was locked, I would find ways to try and unlock the door. And there was this one time I remember, uh, I was jiggling the doorknob because I really, really had to go to the restroom and I didn't want to get beat again. And that's the night when I found out my stepmother was actually a prostitute. I had no idea, you know, what was going on, and because I went out and the living room was like right down to my left side, and she was doing sexual acts with other men in the living room, and I just didn't want to get caught. I didn't care what she was doing. I just want to get caught, so I would slowly creep towards, just to go to the bathroom. Before I know it, one of her, I guess, her clients caught me and said, "Hey, there's a kid in this flat." Because in London it was called a flat. That's what apartments are called. And she got up and just came at me, just like full speed, so full of rage, and she was naked, and I remember there being like cocaine everywhere, and she came at me and literally beat me like all the way in into the bathroom, stomped my head against the commode, uh, pretty much like cracked like 3 of my ribs. Um, my head was internally, bleeding. So after she did all that, it's like all of a sudden she felt bad for me, and then she pretty much told the guy that she was doing stuff with, "Hey, you got to go. I gotta take him to the hospital." So I got stitches in my head. I went ahead and got looked at on some other things. She told the doctors that I tripped, I fell, and I hurt my ribs or whatever. And came back, and it was like all that was just a ruse because the abuse just continued. And my father was never around. He was always over at business trips. My father used to work for NASA and JPL, which is Jet Propulsion Laboratories, and he used to work with the government. He did certain things that he really never got to really fully tell me about, because I was too young to understand how, like, government oppositions are, and like certain missions that are to be carried out and all that stuff like that. I had no idea back when I was a kid, but now that I know now, my father was he was a agent for the government, for computer science. And my father would actually hack into like other computer systems. He would hack into banks. My father would hack into like other powerful men's directories. He would steal money from them. He would go into their accounts, pretend like he was being somebody else, and he would take people's properties from underneath them, with under a fake ID, a fake social security number. And he did that for the government for many years. And my father was just never around, so it was just an ongoing cycle of violence and child abuse. And I went ahead and just accepted the fact that no matter what I'm gonna do, I'm always just gonna get beat. I'm always gonna get hit, And then for a while, I accepted also my father isn't gonna be around. One day, he came back into town. He had like a business suit on and everything, and he would ask me how I've been and what's going on. And I remember my stepmother telling me if I ever told my father what like has happened to me, that she would kill me, and she would make sure that I regret it for the rest of my life. Just a lot of threats towards me, saying that she would slit my throat and all that stuff. So I didn't tell my father what happened, but I would hint to things like, Dad, can I please come with you? I don't want to be here. Can I please come with you? And he would just tell me, well, there's certain places that that you can't be with me, but there's this one place that he had to go at one point for one of his assignments from the government, and that was Malta. So took me and went to Malta. We visited another one of his female companions, if you will. She lived in Malta, and that's when I went over there, and I got to meet other family members that were also involved in the cult, which I didn't know back in that time. And it's like it was like one of the greatest times of my childhood. It's just to be with my father, and it was golden. Everything I got, I wanted. I didn't have to deal with my stepmother. I was just so happy to be away from her. I remember we used to live in mansions, like huge mansions. My next door neighbor had a tiger in like her backyard. There's waterfalls in the backyard, and everywhere we went, everywhere we stayed at, my father had these big luxurious mansion looking houses. I remember having like first floors and third floors all to myself in these mansions, and they came equipped with game rooms. They came equipped with like cinemas, and anything that I wanted, I can do it. There was one place that came equipped with a bar. It came with like a actual like concession like stand, and it's in this giant mansion like house, and it was all mine. My father said, this is all yours. And I remember just going around, just trying every arcade game, trying every drink, trying every, just everything that I could possibly try. By by the time it was time for me just to crash out at the end of the night, well, there was a repeated pattern where my father would come and wake me up. It would be like odd number of times, like 2 o'clock in the morning, 4 o'clock in the morning, just so I could join him for certain events. And I come to find out these were actual rituals. And my father would take these women and take them down to the basement, and he would whip them. He was, which I now know what it is now. It's sadomasochistic rituals, and he was showing me, and having me hear what he would do with these women. And there were certain nights where I couldn't even sleep. I heard nothing but blood curdling screams all night. I heard like violence beyond anything like I ever heard of before in my life. Like there was like rattlings of chains. There was, women screaming all over the place. It was him yelling, cussing, very, very angrily too, like at all these women. And there was another repeated pattern where there were some nights where he would wake me up, sometimes around like the same time, and he would say, pack your stuff, we have to go. And I was like, why? I love this place. I got everything I have here. I got the whole third floor to myself. I got the whole first floor to myself. Like, I can do whatever I want here. I got all the toys. And by this time, I'm like like 7 to 8 years old by this time. I didn't have to worry about going to school. My father put me in this art school that I really didn't pay attention to. I just drew whatever I wanted. So, and it didn't matter. My father would pay for it. And I didn't want to leave my school. And he didn't give me no questions. He didn't give me no answers. He didn't just get up and we got to leave. We have to leave. And I remember there were times, like, my father had so much stuff in these mansions. He would literally have to get like cranes to get grand pianos and statues and things out of this house. And for what reason, I never really knew, other than the only explanation that I know now as an adult, that they were never his. Nothing was ever his. These houses were never his. These mansions were never his. These possessions, these belongings. He had vehicles that, like, he would be taking out. He would export them, import them all across the country, overseas. These things were never his. He would take these things from people or con them out from under them. And this was just a repeated pattern. So it went from overseas, then we went back to London, England. That's when I had to face my stepmother again. And she actually told me the reason why she beats me. And this time she felt a little sorry for me for some reason. I don't know why. But she was saying the reason why, is because you look just like you look just like your daddy and everything he put me through, and pretty much just alluding to me. The reason why I'm being abused is because of your father, and you look just like him. You're a spitting image of him, and I hate him, and so I hate you. And I had to live with that, and the violence just continued from there. My father would leave again. I didn't get to see my dad again. I constantly got my face busted, even if I looked at her. I got hit with the most random objects. Anything other than a belt is what I got, beat with. Even if I wanted to say, hi, I would just get hit. So I was back to square one with that. Well, come to find out, she's been hiding letters that my mother has sent me from prison, all the way from Texas. And I guess one night when she was drunk, because she was constantly drunk and constantly high on drugs, one night she was drunk and she said there was a letter from your mom, but she's too stupid and she's too this and too that to, you know, come get you guys or something like that. And she went ahead and handed me the letter, and I remember it just written, just really, really, beautiful pieces of paper. There was like drawings on there. There were certain things that there was like certain designs. I was a huge fan of the Wizard of Oz, so my mother would draw this witch on a broomstick for me, and thus created like the passion I have for art today. So I was very, very excited to even have those kinds of artworks done, and I was excited to just draw it myself. And when I was interested to even wanting to do more artwork such as that, I would ask my mother, well, I would ask her to write my mother, I want to be able to, do some artwork, just like you do. I want to be able to, draw just like you and everything. And I never really knew if she really sent those letters to my mother when she was in prison. Well, a year passed, and lo and behold, it surprised me. I was in my bedroom, and I remember hearing some thumping or something going on at the front door, and I couldn't really open my door because it was locked. But then, out of nowhere, okay, I couldn't really open my door because, of course, it was locked as always. And I heard some thumping, I heard some shouting and some yelling and everything. And out of nowhere, out of my surprise, my mother showed up and she kicked open the door. And she said, "Get your things, son, we're leaving." And I was like, I couldn't believe what I was looking at. I was like, my mother, she's actually here. And her and my stepmother at that time, they were fighting. My mom beat my stepmother so bad. I remember her putting her through glass windows. I remember her beating her against this china cabinet. I mean, my mom beat her so bad. She laid up on the floor in the fetal position, and all I can remember was her crying and just curled up into like this little ball, and there was blood everywhere. And my mother said, "Get your stuff, son, we're leaving." And just like that, she took me, and she also had my sister too. However, my sister, she was still very, very young. She was an infant, around that time. She was maybe like, I'd say 1 or 2 years old. So, like toddler stage around there. My sister didn't get, abused or nothing like that. The truth be told, my father really didn't care about my sister. The only thing that he said about my sister is that she would make a terrific whore one day. And I think about that now, and I could just, be like, I could feel my stomach turn just when I remember hearing my father say those words. But she took me and my sister, and we I can't remember everything, but I remember it was a struggle to get all the way back to the airport. We met cab drivers. There were we had to go through homeless shelters. There were certain people that they were strangers, but they looked like they were there to help us. And I was very young at that time. I just wanted to play. I just wanted to be in my own zone and draw these little witches that my mother would draw me all the time. And so for just the longest time, we've had a lot of help trying to get to the airport. Finally made it to the airport, flew all the way back to San Antonio, Texas, and that's where I met the other half of my mother's family. And come to find out, I had Latinos in my family, and not just Latinos in my family. I had Native Americans in my family, so it wasn't just just. I literally thought I was just born into like a family of these weird individuals who were indeed just these weird naked individuals who were literally just witches, and they lived what you call the lifestyle. They never told me like the name of the lifestyle or whatever. I remember the name of the cult. It's called Valencia. It's been a very long time. Since I even heard of that. Even heard of that word. But I got to experience a more better childhood than I got to, and went ahead and met my cousins, and kept the I kept inside, that even though I was abused, I wasn't gonna let it, come up and surface, you know, any type of situation or circumstance I was in. I just held that inside, and I just kept it inside. So I didn't let it show. I didn't let my anger show. I didn't let my emotions show. Sometimes it was hard. Sometimes it was to the point where I just wanted to be left alone, and not think about the things I've seen, and I've heard. My mother would ask me certain questions, and I would tell her certain things, and from then on, as I grew older, uh, we struggled so much that we went from homeless shelter to homeless shelter. My, my mother was still dealing with issues of drugs. She was still a drug addict. She was still she was still in trouble with the law. So we really didn't have nowhere else to stay. She couldn't find certain places to work, so she had to work under the table, to make ends meet. My grandmother and my grandfather died, and we were supposed to have our own. It was like a trailer, and it was like a single. I believe it was either a single or a double wide trailer that was supposed to be given to us. However, my mother's side of my family came by, and I remember after it's all said and done, they stripped everything clean. They took the air conditioner. They took every appliance. They took everything. They even took the trailer for themselves. They damaged the trailer. And one of my mother's sisters, one of my aunts, said, pretty much kick rocks. This is ours, and we had nowhere to go. So it was just an ongoing cycle of homeless shelters. And once again, it was like the same repetitive thing. We found help in strangers all around Texas, and there were certain, individuals that once again, I got comfortable with, regardless of situation circumstance. Because little did I know, these were bandidos. These were one percenters. These were Latino bikers, and I had no idea that's what my family was involved in. So on the other side, I had witches and warlocks, and the other side, I had biker gangs that were like heavily involved in both sides of my family. And for the longest time, I got to know that side of the family, and my aunt, and well, not just one of my aunts, but multiple aunts and uncles. They were all part of this biker scene. And as I got older, I realized that we really didn't have nothing. We had nothing, to show for. We had nothing to amount to. And my mother would sometimes, she would find certain houses, but we couldn't really afford to just maintain and stay there. So we were part of what my mother calls the Movers of the Month Club. So I was thinking like this ain't nothing to me, because I'm used to this with my father. I would just literally move like out of nowhere. So this ain't nothing to me. I'm used to this by now. So we would move every month. My father would contact us periodically, and she knew what my mother was doing, and being the person he wasn't out to, you know, just threaten her. My father was very, he was calculated. As always, he would contact my mother and try to like smooth talk her into coming back to him and everything. But I pretty much am positive that she was done with that part of her life. And we ran into other strangers that come to find out these were preachers, and these were people that were a part of certain churches and stuff. I remember being a part of the Salvation Army, you know, and I actually got to enjoy certain things of the Salvation Army. I was a bell ringer. I remember being like 9 years old, ringing the bell with this older gentleman, and he would buy me hot chocolates and stuff, and I would stand in the freezing cold just ringing bells this whole entire time. And mind you, like, we moved so much. Like, now we're in Pennsylvania, and I remember seeing this little clip art thing in this comic, and it was a scene about how, you know, which the older gentleman, he gave to me while I was ringing the bell, and I was like, I'm bored, and he's like, well, here's something to read. And I remember reading this comic strip, and it was about how this man was guilty of his sin, and how you know, if he wasn't going to change his life, you know, then he's in danger of hell. And I read that comic, and like to this day, it's still like embedded in my mind. Like, wow, you know, like apparently hell must be a real place, because there's so many people that I've been meeting since I've been a kid, talking about hell all the time and talking about God. And you know, so the only thing that I was interested in is singing songs. I really enjoyed the worship. I really enjoyed the praise and the songs and stuff. But at the same time, it's like I still remember the rituals that were being carried out. And to be honest with you, sometimes it would block those praises out. Sometimes it would block that worship out that these churches would have us do. Even though I really enjoyed it and was full of, you know, full of joy getting out of these praise songs and these worship songs, my mind would still go back to those women getting beaten and there's blood everywhere, and you know, they were being strapped, you know, to tables and chairs, and there were someone strapped to the wall, you know, just getting whipped. And that's all. Sometimes I just couldn't think about anything else but that. So it just, you know, and eventually it was getting so overwhelming to the point where I got older and I was actually curious, what was that? Because it just kept on coming up in my mind. And lo and behold, when I was like a couple of years later, like 11 years old, my father spoke to my mother again, because my mother was yet again on the run, and we had nowhere to go yet again. And my father took advantage of it and said, well, if you come here, you know, I'll make sure that the kids are taken care of. I'll make sure we can get you a place where, you know, you get to work or whatever. And my mother accepted it. So we came back to my father, and it was the same thing as always, except now these women had collars on. They were dressed in black leather, thigh-high boots, and everywhere they went, they had these collars on. A couple of them had chains connected to the collar. And now that I know what that is now, that was considered a ranking system within what my father had going on of sadomasochism. And I remember being there at Thanksgiving one year, and one woman was cooking, the other one was cleaning, the other one was in the computer room, the other one was outside gardening, the other one was doing something else in some other room, another one was down in the like the basement, but they would call it the dungeon. And I remember my father, he was sitting in his office, and it was just me and my sister. We're just very young, and we're just sitting at the table. She called us to the table, and she called my father Master. She would scream his name, Master, dinner's ready. And my father would come and sit at the table. He had nothing on but this long, lengthy robe, and his name was embroidered on the back of it. I still remember to this day. He had something embroidered right here too, and he would sit at the table. These women would pull the chair, and they would sit at the table, and he would talk with me and my sister, and would say, how's everyone doing? Are you ready to eat? And I say, yes, sir. And all of a sudden, my father snapped his fingers, just like that, and whistled, and all these women came out of nowhere. And the one who was cooking, she put the plates on the floor, and my father had these women literally eat on the floor like they're dogs. I've never seen anything like that in my entire life. And my father would sit there, and he would call to one of them, and they would come up to his leg, and he would pet them like they're dogs. And I would look at him, and I was like, "What is this?" And being as a young man, I to be honest, I marveled that. I was like, "What is going on here?" My sister was terrified. She had no idea what was going on, but she was terrified. She was very uncomfortable. My mother was so upset. She got from the table, and she started something. She started a whole argument, and my father got up from the table, and they were fighting this whole entire time. And he finally said, you and the kids need to stay down in the other part of the basement. And we live in this tiny area of the basement, and there was no beds. There was like a little makeshift kitchen down there with like a stove and a microwave. There was a little bitty kitchen table down there, and there was just mats that we got to sleep on. And there was one door that led outside. And I remember just being there, and my father would call up to me from upstairs just to check on me. I just to get like some information or whatever of what's happening on down there. And I would spend some time with him, and he would once again put me into these I guess like these grooming segments where once again we would watch pornography. We would he would show me artifacts that has been passed down to his family for generations. He would show me like like objects. He said that they were enchanted. He would show me altars that literally had the zodiacs on them. And I remember bumping into them one day, and I've never heard my father be so angry before. And he said, "Don't you ever touch that altar again. Don't you ever, I don't care if you bump into it, don't you ever touch my altar." And I was, yes, sir, And one day, my mother, she actually found a job, and she had to walk in the snow. I remember there was like 8 feet of snow that she would have to walk all the way to this the store called Price Chopper up in Pennsylvania, and she would literally walk miles in the snow just to go to work. And she told me, don't ever open this door for nobody. Well, for some reason, I don't know if she was trying to test me or whatever, but my mother was still going through some things. She was a very angry person. She was very she was hurt. You could tell she was very hurt all the time. And her and my father kept on butting heads at it as much as possible, but no matter what, he made sure that she would stay down there, and she would put us down there as well. And I remember a knock at the door, and of course I'm young. I'm involved in like this new video game that my father got for me and everything, and I just couldn't wait to play it. And I heard a knock at the door, and I went to go answer it, and it was my mother, and she was so furious that she spanked me. Like she said, "I told you not to open this door for nobody." And my father heard what was going on, and I went ahead and he called me upstairs, and I got called upstairs. Little did I know, to this day, my father had cameras placed. I never knew my father had cameras placed on there, but he saw everything what happened, and he said, "Show me, where she hit you at." And I'm sure, So I showed him where she hit me at, and he took pictures of them. He said there were multiple bruises on me, which I really can't remember to this day if there were a lot of bruises on me. Um, he called the police on my mother, and they came by, and I remember him inviting them into his house, and he like sitting had coffee with them. All the women were sitting there being nice to them, talking with them and everything, and he would explain to them about the situation with my mother. And I already knew what was going on. He wanted to go ahead and put my mother back in jail. Well, they needed some more information or whatever from my mother. They went down there. They didn't have enough to put her away, so her and my father got into it. Next thing you know, I was woken up. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning, and there was thumps. There was more, screaming. Like it sounded like someone like bulldozed a whole half of the house, and I got up and woke up, and I saw my father hitting my mother in the face, literally beating her to the point where she had to get up off the floor. He dragged her by her hair, drug her all the way up the steps, and then punched her in the face, go all the way down the steps, came all the way down the steps, grabbed the phone. There was a cord on the phone, put the phone around her neck and started choking her out with it, and started beating her in the face with the telephone, and looked at me and said, "This is how you handle women." And I'm like, to this day, man, it caused so much trauma. Like, and because of that happened, I never put my hands on a woman ever. I've forever never ever even thought about even touching a woman like my father did. And needless to say, my mother tried to call the police. However, something happened. I don't know if they were in my dad's pocket or whatever, but they took her away instead. And my father got us back, and didn't want my sister. He tried everything he could. He even tried to, give away my sister to someone else, because he had other people in the neighborhood that were part of this little cult thing that he had going on. And push comes to shove, before you know it, my mother got back out. And one day when my father was not home, she came up and grabbed me again and took me all the way back downstairs. It says, "We're leaving here. I'm sorry. I'm never gonna do that to you again." Like, she was just so very sympathetic. Like, she was apologetic. Like, and I remember her face is all bandaged up and everything. And went ahead and took us out of that out of the part of the basement that very day. We never told a soul. We never told the neighbors. We didn't tell my father, nothing. We just packed up and left. And my mother took us another part in Pennsylvania, and that's when I got to get a taste of the projects. So we stayed in the projects. I was now going on 13 years old now, and I got into a bad crowd, and started doing certain things, and come to find out they were drug dealers. Some of them were gang members. And my mother found out about some incidences in around the projects, and we went ahead and decided to start looking for another place to stay. So we found another place to stay around Pennsylvania. My mother ended up befriending another person at her workplace, and she had a whole third-story house. I can't remember exactly what it's called. A duplex. She got a duplex, and it was like being with my dad again, because I'm not used to having these big houses at this age. So we stayed at that house. However, the same people that were at the projects, which I was still involved with them, and they would speak to me um, throughout the days. Sometimes after school, sometimes during or like before. Come to find out, these certain friends of mine were part of this gang called the Latin Kings, and then they I remember one night they were telling me at the balcony, because I had a balcony and I had these windows, and I remember them like throwing rocks or something at in my windows and telling me to come downstairs. But it was like late at night, and I would sneak out of the duplex because I'd be afraid if my mother found out, and we would go out joyriding all the way down to New York. I had no idea I was in Soundview, Bronx, New York. To this day, I was like, wow, I really was down there, and here I am, this little 13-year-old kid just running around, with a bunch of Puerto Ricans just hanging out in New York, and no idea what I was really being involved in. Like, I remember these big guys. They had black jackets on. They carried the yellow bandanas, and they were everywhere. We were at this huge Puerto Rican party, and I remember one of their, I believe it was like a grandmother of theirs, and she was at this altar, and she had this stack of money laying right there, and she would tell us, "Don't you ever touch that money." And then she spoke Spanish, because at that time I really didn't understand everything she was saying, but my friend said, she's a bruja, that's brujeria that she's doing. And then it looked familiar. I saw the same altar my father had, but it was decorated. It was like, it had all kinds, like there was like this one cloth on there. My father's was solid black with the zodiac symbols on it, all around it, but theirs was like colorful. It was very colorful, and I was like, wow, this is what my father was talking about, the altars. And I remember just sleeping over his house, and in his room, the roof had like a huge hole in it, and we would sit there, and that's when I got introduced to marijuana. And we would sit there, we would smoke weed, and we would literally just watch like snow coming down from the roof, and we would just sit there and just watch it, because there was this one little crack of light that would come down from the roof, and we would just sit there, and we would just talk about anime and adult movies, things like that, and eventually I got involved with them so much that there was fights happening at skating rinks. Little did I know it was gang activity, it was gang involvement. And one day, I guess, we got into it with a group of kids. There was more fights going on, and before you know it, someone literally around where my duplex was, got shot like 10 times, and we heard it like right by my window. I looked up, and it was someone that got shot over a bad drug deal, and that was enough for my mother to say, we got to move out of here. We contacted people back in Texas. Come to find out, there was some bad things going on down there. So my mother said, we're not going back to Texas. We found the same ones that were in Beaumont, Texas, that they were now in Alabama. So we went down to Alabama, which was a huge journey in itself. And we came to visit them, and this time the older gentleman that was preaching at one of those churches was very sick, and he was very ill, and we were there just in time for his funeral. He passed away, and his wife was telling us, that we're more than welcome to stay here, get up on our feet, and so that's what we did. I went to high school. Well, I didn't go to high school. I went to junior high school there, in middle school, and that's when I came across certain people that I knew that I recognized. They carried bandanas, and I knew, as okay, These are G's that, you know, I'm used to. I used to run with these folks, but these weren't Puerto Ricans, you know. These were black folks. So I was at a bit of a disadvantage. Personally, that's how I felt. And so I would go up to them and I would do knowledge to them, and they were impressed. They were like, "How do you know this stuff?" And I was like, you know, because I'm from PA, you know, I used to roll with a couple of these guys, you know, they were Latin King and everything, and they were like, "Well, we are BGDs, we are gangster disciples," and so they started showing me what they do. I started hanging around with them a lot, and before you know it, they found out I'm an artist. So they would tell me to draw, you know, gang signs all over their hoodies. I would like decorate the hoodies, their shirts, you know. I would do it all over their clothes. There was like sometimes I would do like hats and sneakers, and I remember just doing the 6 point star, and pitchfork, 8 balls everywhere. And and the more I got involved in it, like the more I wanted to do it for them, and then the girls got involved, and before you know it, we started hanging out. Then we had girls getting involved, and that's when I started, you know, coming in to where I lost my virginity, and then I got into it again with some other people that we ran with, and things got so hot and heavy at the school I was. I just became a coward, and I was like, I don't want to do this no more. You know, I didn't want to do this no more, and they wouldn't let me, you know, go. And I was like, I don't want to be a part of this no more. You know, there's certain things that I don't want to be a part of. I don't care about you shooting up people's houses. I don't want to shoot up no houses. So I didn't know what else to do. So I ratted on them. I told on them at at the middle school, and the middle school principal gathered all of us in there one by one and told us what is to go down. And I told my mom what happened, and my mother said, "You're not getting my house shot up. We're not going to be around this gang stuff." That's why we left Pennsylvania. So we picked up and we moved to Valley, Alabama. Went to Valley, Alabama, and it was a whole nother ball game. Uh, Surrounded by rednecks, country guys, and I really became heavily involved into the drug scene down there. I had pretty much did everything but methamphetamine because I don't know. It wasn't my thing. I saw certain people that were on it that I hung around that were family members, and I didn't want to be a part of the methamphetamine scene. So just got involved heavily into, you know, selling it for certain people so I could make ends meet while I was in high school. Then I got involved with other people that were doing it. Then I came across pills, and pills were my thing instead of weed. Then I would, you know, mix it up. I would lace my drugs with all kinds of stuff. Then I got to know promethazine, and then I just got heavily involved in so much of that stuff. Then I got involved with the wrong people. They started going to prison left and right, and I didn't want to be a part of that. And so I just stayed away from those people. And one day, you know, I was just seeing this one television show called Miami Ink, and I was like, you know, I could do that, and I got very interested in wanting to do tattoos from there on. And I made my own little makeshift tattoo machine. It was literally out of garbage. I took a milk carton, cut it up. I made a little reservoir. I took a pin, and I melted down the pen to where like the needle would stick through. I didn't have a needle per se, so I used I think it was like a paper clip, and I would sharpen it down, and then I would like take a whole bunch of them and melt it together, and I would put it around this little piece of where the milk carton was, and I would take a RC motor and would splice the wire, and I would splice it to the connection, and I would plug it into the socket, and I had a full-blown this tattoo machine, and started playing with it, and I was very horrible at it, and but I was intrigued to learn more about tattooing. So a friend of mine heard what I was doing, and we were both high one night, and he was like, "Sure, go ahead and try it." And it was the worst tattoo I think I've ever done in my whole life. And my sister found out about it, and she wanted to get tattoos, and she was like, "You could practice on me." And that was my actual first tattoo, because the first one I did, it was just to just to play around. But this one I really tried, and because of what I went through, all I could think about was the pentagram that my father was, it was everywhere when I was a child. So I kind of grew up idolizing the pentagram and what it represented. And I did the pentagram on my sister. And from then on, I just started practicing on all of the friends I had at school, and started practicing on certain people that I met from there, and just got eventually to the point where I feel like I can really hold my own with this tattooing thing. So I started going out, and I started traveling house to house, hotel to hotel, and I would just be a mobile tattoo service. And I did it for drugs, I did it for sex, I did it for money, and I just became like this self-proclaimed so-called little rock star everywhere I went, and eventually over the years I just got so good at it, and that's when I met the mother of my first two children, Jaden and Eliza. My oldest, he's 16. My youngest is 13 years old now. And after that, I told her I was gonna start getting more serious into the tattoo business. Then I started opening up my very first studio, which was it was called Lynette Inc. And I did it out of curiosity. I loved it. It was my first baby. I was really, really excited about going into the tattoo business. To be honest, I had no idea what I was doing. All I knew is that people loved what I did. And a lot of the people that I did when I was in the streets, they came to the studio and everything, and we would do, tattoos, and there was certain things that we shouldn't be doing in there, like drugs and stuff like that. Anyway, got into it really bad with my brother-in-law. He was drunk that night, and we got into a fight. He threw a chair at my window, and when my window shattered, I shattered with it. And so I was just like, man, I'm not even going to do this again. I think I'm just going to stick to the streets. So that's what I did. I went from certain places and where I was in the valley, and I started. I had a vehicle now, and I was able to go furthermore. So I went to places like Montgomery. I went to places like Birmingham, Tuscaloosa. After that, I got more connections with very seedy likes of people. I've tattooed meth kingpins. I've tattooed like every drug dealer you can think of around that area, in Tuscaloosa, Montgomery, Birmingham, Valley. Then I got further down to Georgia. Then I started tattooing strippers. I started tattooing prostitutes. Just did a lot of tattoos for a lot of these people, and word just got out. And then before you know it, just one day, I got a invitation from California, and I was like, oh, okay, sure. She said she was willing to have me come down and do like tattoos over there, and where her makeshift studio is. So I said, all right. She bought me my plane ticket, all expenses paid trip straight to California, Southern California, and I went over to where it was beside Long Beach, and I met her, and we got involved, and we got a little intimate in our business relationship, and before you know it, I started doing tattoos for her. I did tattoos over where her family was, and long story short, it didn't end so well. And right before I said I just need to get back to my kids. They're little, they need me, and I need to, start getting this child support thing off the ground, which was just a lie. I really didn't care about it. I just wanted to get away from her and continue my business somewhere else. And she told me before I left, and for some reason, it stuck with me to this day. And she said, I'm a witch. I was assigned, to trap you. And I was like, what? And she said, yeah, I'm a witch. And she showed me her hair, and her hair had like with this one white strip down it. And I remember from my father and from like those women that we were around, I remember what that was a sign of, like she was seasoned. So with that being said, she says, well, my job is done, so I'll send you a plane ticket, back to Alabama. So I went.